Hi there. This is Lori Rayfeld with God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee. And today, my guest is Mark Wentz. He is a physicist. He he likes to search the unknown. He likes to go out there and figure out what's within the energy of of nature, whether it's paranormal or his curiosity goes all over the gambit, which is really incredible. And I met him through a friend who died. His name is Kevin Banks. I knew Kevin back in RAF Beltwaters in 1978 to 80. And I wrote something on his obituary. And the interesting part of the story was that he told me that, well, it's kind of crazy. And it felt a little crazy, but I'm pretty crazy. So it worked. He said, well, we've been talking to Kevin. And I said, okay, talking to Kevin. He's gone, but you're talking to Kevin. Yeah. And they said we should talk to you. And that was the beginning of a friendship that I totally enjoy, admire, and I'm just so happy for him. So my introduction is pretty, let me just put it this way. You guys are going to enjoy this podcast, no doubt. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Lori. Thanks for the introduction. Appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely.
Can I add a little thing? I'm an educator, and I've done physics. I was a neurobiologist, and I've been an educator. So I've done three things, just to sort of clarify.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you've got your mind is just really curious of the
Bottom line is, I just want to know the truth. You read the philosophies, you read the teachings. I've read a lot. I'm not saying I'm any expert on stuff, but until you go out and do it, the teachings are fine, but I want to experience it. And so I do everything I can to try to learn whatever the phenomena is. And you're right, it runs the gamut. It goes all the way from the afterlife, psychic connections, all the way up through Sasquatch and extraterrestrials. And so I try to go out and experience as much as I possibly can.
Absolutely. It was just phenomenal being able to talk to someone with your background who helps me connect the dots. Since it's like I kind of experience these realms, yet I don't have the language sometimes to be able to explain it, except in lay people's terms.
It's complicated. I mean, this stuff is immensely complicated. So, can I back up a little bit and talk a little bit more about how we met each other in a little more detail?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It was I tend to ramble, but I'll try to get right to the point, but I do want to link in a couple of significant events that led to us meeting. The linkage with you started in a place called Board Camp Crystal Mine down here in Arkansas. I live south. Maureen and I live south of Mena, Arkansas, and there's a place called Board Camp Crystal Mine. It's only about 10 and a half, 11 miles away from me as a crow flies. Anyway, they were on TV. Josh Gates had their place on TV. I think it was Expedition Unknown or one of the Josh Gates shows. I saw it on TV back in 2019, I believe it was. And I said, I used to hike down there at the Ouachita Mountains in western Arkansas. So I just hopped in the car and drove down to Board Camp after I watched the Josh Gates show. And anyway, quite a relationship began down at Board Camp. And I think it was the second time I was down there. I was walking up the hill towards what they call the event site, where a lot of the paranormal activities had occurred. And I was with the owner, Orville, of the property. And then there was another guest there by the name of Shelley. I never met Shelley in my life. Um,
Mhm.
the three of us were walking up the hill, and I knew nothing about Shelley. I really knew nothing about Shelley. So, but Shelley and I looked at each other and said, "Did you feel that?" And I said, "Yeah, I did feel like this little tingling up and down my back, the hair stand on end kind of thing, a little electric static." So yeah, I did feel
Mhm.
that. Now it was like 11 o'clock at night, and there was a moon out, but it was only partial moon. We could see a little bit, but mostly it was just pretty much dark. And so Shelley and I looked at each other. We turned around in the direction the energy seemed to be coming from, and Orville, for whatever reason, I don't know why he did this, but he left us and he went back to the house. We were away from the house by 100 yards or so, and Shelley started taking pictures into the black. I mean, it was black. I, I didn't know why she was doing that. I mean, it was black. We saw nothing. Literally didn't see anything except a little bit of moonlight, but that was about it. And so, okay. So I was curious about the source of this energy. So I started sort of feeling where the energy was. I walked down away from Shelley, over off the path we were walking on, and I stood there. Once I didn't see anything visually, but I started hearing things. I started hearing a horse, uh, like like a
Mhm.
big horse. And anyway, I heard this horse, and then this guy on saying "whoa," and then I heard the horse snort. I heard it go by me very close, turn around and come back by me again. It was all over with in under a minute. And
Mhm.
during that whole time, Shelley had been taking pictures, and I don't know why. There wasn't anything to see.
Mhm.
Anyway, the next morning when we looked at the pictures, lo and behold, there was an apparition of a horse. It was very clear. Um, if as clear as apparitions could be, and you could see the leather work on the horse. You could see the rider leaning back, and I noticed that her timestamp on her camera. She'd been standing up there for over 4.5 minutes, almost 5 minutes, snapping away, taking pictures. And I know I wasn't
Mhm.
down there for more than a minute. So there was a time weirdness. Anyway, so those horse pictures. Okay, so believe
Mhm.
it or not, this leads to you. So there was a guy on the internet, I think his name was Bruce Halliday, and he posted some horse pictures on a ghost site that I don't remember the name of the website or anything, but it was about ghosts and
Mhm.
stuff and horses. And I said, I'll be damned, that horse sort of looked like the horse that Shelley took a picture of. And so I contacted Bruce Halliday through that website, and he told me to get in contact with a guy named Larry Costa. Now, I think this is like 2021, I think, about this time now. And so, anyway, Larry, as you know, because you interviewed Larry on a previous show podcast you had, Larry became a close friend, and he's an extremely talented, uh, for lack of a better word, channeler, maybe psychic medium. And
Absolutely.
um, I he was so good and so. Anyways, there's quite a history involved with that. But uh, I went down to Florida where he lived to check him out. I want to know, who is this guy? This guy is so good at this
Mhm.
stuff. And I realized, he was not schizophrenic. Oddly enough, that's what I used to do for a living. Years ago, I worked just with schizophrenics. So I knew what a schizophrenic acted like and everything. I was quite good at that. He was none of these things, just normal guy, normal otherwise, but he had very, very powerful spiritual connections
Mhm.
that I began to take quite seriously. And in one of the contacts he'd made, he and I, but mostly just him, Larry was contacting this guy named Kevin. Kevin had a very strong contact and was telling Larry how to make better contact with entities in the other realms. And one of the things Kevin said to Larry specifically was, we make better, we really, first off, everything comes from our side. We are the ones who control what you guys experience on your side. But we have strict limitations on how we can contact our realm from where Kevin was. And Kevin said one thing that works best, or works well, I shouldn't say best, is to use glass, silicon dioxide, quartz crystals, and glass. And we can somehow latch up with the frequency, the molecular vibration of silicon dioxide. And so Larry said, well, can we see you? So yeah, that's not a problem. Go over to the glass plate in your house, and I'll be in the upper right-hand corner. You'll see my face. So we did, or he did that. I wasn't there at the time, and Larry took all these pictures. Well, none of these pictures are really going to be that clear because of the contact modalities between the realms. It's not like, we're taking pictures on our realm. We're in the same realm. When you're going across realms, the pictures aren't always that clear. And so it was a little fuzzy for sure. And then we took, both Larry and I independently ran an AI processing of this photograph that Larry had taken of Kevin. And we both got the same results. And I then sent that picture to a friend of mine in Pennsylvania, who sent the picture to a guy named Derek Savory, who's recently passed away, and I know you knew Derek. And Derek said, I know this guy. I knew this guy. And so that's Derek then, he's the one who told us what his name was. And then the odd thing about this, and many odd things, there's super number of odd things. The first odd thing was he died in 2013, and he's buried somewhere in a military cemetery in the middle part of the United States. Derek's in England, and he didn't know where Kevin had been buried. And so I said, well, he died in 2013. We got his last name. He was from around. I'm from Leavenworth. I was raised military. I'm from Leavenworth, and so I could Google this guy, Kevin Banks. And lo and behold, he was cremated, and he's in his urn is very, very close to my parents' grave. It's a very large cemetery, thousands of graves. It's one of two military cemeteries in Leavenworth, one on the base and one off base, and even though it's federal land. But it was odd that Kevin was very, very close to my parents. At first, I thought he was buried next to my parents, but then as I did more research, I found out no, he was cremated, not buried. But he's in the little building that's just within 100 yards of my parents' graves, which I found quite odd. And then as I did more research on Kevin, of course, I came across the obituary, and your name was the only one listed. There were no family members listed on the obituary for Kevin Banks. And so that's how I contacted you. And I just looked you up on Facebook, I believe it was, and then contacted you. So that's a little bit of the story leading up to how we met. And then you gave a lot of information about Kevin that led us to Ken Kearns. And Ken Kearns, as you told Larry and I, Ken Kearns is still alive. He lives in Florida. And we contacted, I think you gave us the contact information. We contacted Ken, and it ended up that Kevin on the other side talked to Ken Kearns on this side over the phone, however, through Larry. But the thing that was interesting is the topic of the conversation. The topic of the conversation, Larry would have no knowledge of this whatsoever. It dealt with the pets, the animals in Ken Kern's and Kevin's lives. Their dogs. It talked about their dogs, and they gave names. I mean, how in the world is Larry Costa, who knows nothing about Kevin Banks, is going to know anything
Right,
about
right.
the names of these dogs? So this is a legitimate communication. It was
Yeah,
fascinating,
definitely.
but it led to I already knew Larry was the real deal, but
Mhm.
it was just one of those very quirky stories of communication with someone who had died, 2013, 9 years or 9 years before, communicating directly with living beings on this side with some pretty information that was right
Oh
to the
yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh
we
yeah.
learned
I mean,
learned a yeah.
I was just gonna say it's a bridge,
It's a bridge.
you know?
And then I
Mhm.
then began, of course, I then started doing, I'd had an experience back in 1987, I believe it was, when my father passed away. It was 87 or 88. I was, forget, I think it was
Mhm.
87. September 87. I was living in Manhattan, Kansas, 120 miles west of Leavenworth, Kansas. And when I went to bed, I had a the most vivid lucid dream I'd ever had in my life. And in that dream, my father came to me and told me how much he loved me and he wanted to show me something. And he took me by the hand and he led me into this light, just the same description you get from near death experiencers.
Mhm.
I went into this light with my father, and then we immediately got met by deceased relatives and other entities, light beings. And the light was so powerful. It was never, you can't explain this light. It was
Yeah.
bright, but you weren't being blinded. You were in a blanket of unbelievable love. It was crazy how,
Mhm.
just like love, pure love. And I stood there, I was there for a little bit just watching. And the light being, I don't know who this light being was, uh, said to me, we wanted you to come into the light to see this. You're not done. You haven't even started your mission yet. You need to get back. But I just want you to know your father's in good hands and everything's good. So uh,
Mhm.
turn around and leave. So I did. I turned around and walked out, and then of course it all just disappeared. I woke up,
Mhm.
and remember it was a dream. I woke up. I said, "Whoa, that was like really, really the weirdest, one of the weirdest dreams." And then I didn't know my father was. I knew my father was in the hospital for a checkup, but nobody was thinking about he was going to
Mhm.
die or anything. That wasn't even in the conversation. And so after I woke up, and literally within under 5 minutes, my oldest brother called me and said our father passed away. Well, I didn't know he was going to die, and so that
Mhm.
after that experience, one of several experiences, uh, life changed for me. It changed rather
Mhm.
dramatically. So this stuff with Larry that occurred
Absolutely.
many years later, I began to research it more and more. And yet, it's not like I've done anything that other people can't do. It's not like there's anything terribly remarkable, but boy, I've come across some really interesting research, which you may be familiar with. The first one I came across was Sonia Rinaldi in Brazil. She does it's Rinaldi, Sonia. You can Google her. She does this
Mhm.
remarkable visual contact with people from the other side. Then there's the Soul Phone project here in the United States, which is using
Mhm.
properties of light to do yes or no, answers yes or no. And they're doing something else, I don't know what it is, deals with a keyboard. And then there's a remarkable place in France. Um, I don't actually know the name of this place, but the website is www.ifres.org. not .com, .org, ifres.org. You go to that. It's in French, but so your computer will translate some of it. And
Mm-hmm.
just scroll around, click, keep hitting buttons, and you'll see results. And they've established contact with the other side in a rather remarkable way. And then this all bounces off the skull experiment done in England in the 90s. Uh, and then there's the remarkable phenomena in California. I think it was in the 70s. I'm not 100% sure. It was the Polaroid ghost. This ghost had inhabited this house in L.A. and the owner of the house at the time kept getting contact from this ghost. So he started, just out of curiosity, he just took a Polaroid picture. And long story short, certain kinds of Polaroid film, I think it was called spectrum film, this ghost could literally write answers in English and that you would pick up when they took the Polaroid picture. They'd ask it questions, he'd answer. They asked him his name, his answer was Wright. My name is Wright, Wright. Anyway, that was a weird phenomenon. It was studied intensely. It went on for about over a year. It was scrutinized intensely. Everybody thought they were hoaxing it, and they did everything they could to try to figure out how they're doing it. They even brought the Polaroid people in to analyze stuff. They couldn't figure out any way these guys are hoaxing this. So it seemed to be legit.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm jabbering on and on here, but
No, keep going.
this is just the afterlife stuff. The
Yeah.
Larry Costa work is so profound, it is so involved that Larry has contacted, and I've been very, very fortunate to have Larry confide in me in much of what he's done, and what he's been able to do. I've never heard anybody else, no one, even tried to research some of the best mediums in the world. I've never heard anyone who does the extent that Larry does. And so one night, Larry was in contact with an entity called Wallace, and I know you're familiar with Wallace.
Yeah.
So I would ask Wallace questions through Larry, and I said, Wallace, can you just contact me directly, not through Larry? I need to know. I'd like to know if you're just Larry's figment of his imagination. And somehow Larry's subconscious has convinced himself that this is real. So, can you give me a little tangible evidence, please? And so Wallace said, okay, I will contact you. It was a Friday night. I remember I lived in my little place I lived in, and said I could contact you best at like 3 a.m. The interference is too much in the daytime, and you're not as good at this as Larry is. So I need a little clearer channel. So you're going to have to wake up 3 a.m. And what I want you to do, and this is Wallace telling me this, I want you to walk over those paper flowers you have in your room and just watch them. And you'll see a flower transform. It won't last for very long because you got crappy flowers. You got these plastic. These weren't the right kind of paper for him to hold the manifestation very long. I didn't, honestly, be quite honest, I didn't believe him. So I went to bed, but I decided give him a break, and so I woke up at 3 a.m. I'm wondering, why am I doing this? I go over and I watch the flowers, and sure enough, the flower changed into a human face right in front of my freaking eyes. And it held there for just a moment, and then it disappeared. But it held there long enough for me to know, okay, is he really changing the flower, or is he changing my ability to perceive it? I didn't know the answer to that. He said he was actually changing the flower, but he could have been just playing with my mind. I don't know. I couldn't tell the difference. So anyway, it did give me some confirmation, whether he's actually changing the flower or changing playing with my mind's perception. I
Mhm.
don't know, but it was legit. Um, I know a skeptic could argue that I just made all that crap up in my own mind. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But
No.
I do. Can I say one more thing here real quick? Or
Yeah, please.
okay. So I lean towards him actually changing the flower because I'd had a completely separate event. It had nothing to do with Larry. It had nothing to do with Wallace. I had gotten a dream message uh, from an entity that I'd been in contact with for a long time. I call her Emily. My
Hmm.
suspicion is she's Sasquatch. I could fill you in on the story on that later. But Emily, she usually contacted me through dreams, but not always. Sometimes just in my thoughts during the day. But anyway, she contacted me in dreams, very powerful dreams. She said, write this down immediately. So she gave me these GPS coordinates. And these GPS coordinates are long. It's like I could, you're dreaming, you don't remember stuff. So she said, have paper and pencil immediately, write it down. So I got the dream, I woke up, I wrote it down. I was very clear. I asked her, are these right? She said, yeah. She said, well, I want you to be there at 2 in the morning on such and such a day.
Mhm.
Okay, so I look up these GPS coordinates, and they are in Sycamore Canyon, Arizona. Now, if anybody's ever been to Sycamore Canyon, it's no small feat to get there. You can get to the top of the canyon,
Mhm.
but to get where she wanted me to go, it was not easy. Not easy. Now,
Yeah.
I'll be 71 years old in a month. And this happened a couple of years ago. So I'm 68.
Mhm.
I was 68 years old, something like that. And I'm leading up to something that'll back up Wallace here. So anyway,
Yeah.
point is, I had to train for this. She said, you'll go down to the bottom of the canyon, you follow the creek bed, you'll look up, and you'll see a cave. You gotta climb up to that cave, and you're gonna wait there, and then we'll meet you there. Okay, 2 in the morning. Yeah, right. So I believe it or not, I did this. I trained for months to be able to physically handle this because I knew how I've been to
Wow.
Sycamore Canyon before. I knew it's not like hiking the Rockies or anything where it can be, but it's still pretty
Yeah.
steep. So
Hmm.
so I trained for this. Okay, here's my point. So my roommate at the time thought I was just loonier and loony, crazier and crazy, which I understood. I said, yeah, I think I might be too, but I got to follow through with this. So so go out there and I do this, and it was not easy. I meet with these
Mhm.
entities. There were three entities. There was Emily, my Sasquatch, and then a light being that, and another little short being. I didn't know who the other two really were.
Mhm.
The light being might have been a Nordic. I'm not 100% sure, but I did know Emily,
Mhm.
and the whole purpose of the meeting wasn't about humanity. It was about my soul structure, uh, history of my soul tree, and that's a completely
Mhm.
separate deal. So connections with different entities all over the realms. It's not just the universe that we think of in terms of the
Yeah. Yeah.
four-dimensional space stuff, but the
Mhm.
whole realm connection. And which, by the way, Kevin had talked about, and I had other entities talk about it too with me in years past. But anyway, so I meet with them, and now here's what I found. I got a kick out of this. So the entities told me, your friend back in Kansas, she has some concern. I said, yeah, tell me about it. Said, don't worry about it. We'll take care of her. Okay. I
Oh.
thought I thought when they said that to me that it was a consoling kind of thing. They were going to console her.
Okay.
That's what I assumed it would be. I didn't question it any further.
Mhm.
I was still in shock that any of this was actually occurring. So
Yeah.
it was a remarkable event. It was powerful. It was like the light, somewhat like the tunnel experience I'd had with my father. It was all
Mhm.
love. This was a cave opening that led down into tunnels underneath Sycamore Canyon and goes over to Sedona, Arizona. Goes south and goes north.
Mhm.
There's a whole network of ETs that live underground there, and I was learning a little bit about that. But okay, so when I get back to Kansas, I, I didn't really say anything. I didn't say anything. But Pam, my roommate, my housemate, I meant to say, she said it was freaky while you were gone. The lights kept turning on and off. I couldn't get the TV to work right, and then every frickin' morning, this little object would be some little a little object from a nativity scene. Now, Pam was very religious, very Catholic,
Mhm.
and so every morning an object appeared on the deck. I didn't know where the hell they came from. The first one
Mhm.
was uh, Joseph, and these little
Mhm.
objects would be on the deck looking in through the sliding glass door, looking into the house. They were purposely placed to look into the house. And
Mhm.
then I go out to get this little object and look at it, and then another one would appear. They just appeared. I don't know where the hell they came from. They just appeared.
Wow.
The next one was one of the wise men on a camel.
Mhm.
And then the next one was Mary holding the cradle with baby Jesus. There were three of them. Each morning I'd go out before I left for work, this Pam talking, and I'd have a new object. And I couldn't get my
Mhm.
TV to work while you were gone. I said, and then she said, this is freaking me out. You're going to have to leave." So she made sure I had to leave. So okay, all right. So
Okay.
so I'm thinking back on this. Why did they do this? Well, when they said they're going to take care
Mhm.
of Pam, what that meant was they're going to make sure that I wasn't going to be around her anymore because she was changing the whole energy of my relationship with the other realms, that they didn't like her around. That was what I got. But anyway, so
Well.
why does this relate to Wallace? Because they manipulate, they create, they in metaphysical terms, these are called apports, of course. They were producing apports that were physical. Don't know where they were coming from,
Mhm.
and they were doing it. I mean, who the else is doing it? I wasn't there. I was in Arizona. I, I
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
know what. So I give some credence to Wallace actually changing the flower instead of just playing with my mind. If these
Yeah. Yeah.
entities could put little objects on Pam's deck, Wallace could change the petals on that satin paperish flower.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
was just so. And then I learned so much more from Larry about how the entities from other realms can manifest physically as well as mentally on our realm. Um,
Mhm.
so I put a lot of credence in this stuff. So
Oh
anyway,
yeah. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned it because I know sometimes I like to doodle draw, like so if I'm watching TV and often what I like to do is not know what I'm drawing. It's kind of like, don't even have my mind on it, but I'm drawing. And often I'll look into the drawing and I'll actually um see people in the drawing and they look like I did a really good job drawing them, but they're like really small. It could have been like a scribble, and then all of a sudden you could see their face, and it was just always remarkable. I mean, and it's the same thing sometimes when you look down at the floor,
yeah.
all of a sudden you can see faces coming out of it, or even see the body too. But yeah, I believe it.
I mean, I think I got to the point, and actually working with Larry's. and the entities. It's really not Larry that I work with. It's the entities that come through Larry.
Yeah.
Basically, one thing I've gained from them is this pareidolia. We look at stuff. Of course, our brain. It seems, the neurobiologists tell us that we look for patterns, which I'm quite sure is true. But I think the patterns we look for may have a lot of significance in what we're doing in life, or our connections with
Mhm.
entities from other realms. So what many people just call pareidolia, I think it's a little bit like a Rorschach's test, which is sort of pareidolia.
Mhm.
I think it's
Mhm.
deeper than just a meaningless pattern recognition. Sure, it's a pattern recognition, but I think
Mhm.
it's a pattern recognition that has some significance to it. So I take pareidolia fairly, I take notice of it. I don't
Mhm.
just ignore it when it happens. So when you're writing and you're seeing stuff, well, you are definitely representing what's going on in your subconscious, which doesn't mean it's just in your brain, in my opinion. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what our
Yeah.
brain really, neurobiologists, the story is, our brain just takes in information from our environment and puts it into a picture
Mhm.
in our brain. But, and that's what our brain generally does. But I'm getting more and more as I'm learning more about this stuff. Our brain is way more than that. Clearly, it is that, but it's way more than that. It's more like a receiver, from
Mhm.
if we listen carefully and use pareidolia as a tool, as only one of many tools, we can gain information from other realms. And for some reason, Larry Costa is really good at it, and don't know
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Larry doesn't even know why. He doesn't even know why.
Yeah.
But um, have you have
Yeah.
you
It's,
ever?
it's almost the way he processes energy, and apparently there's less static between what's going on in his mind, or maybe he's communicating through his soul, or his gut. You know, I think that, yeah, he has less static in between them and us. I
Yeah,
mean, I talked to my mom and my sister who passed away, and usually I get, I'll say hi mom, and I'll hear my mom say something like, hey baby, how are you? Are you doing okay? That kind of thing. But then after, I can't really seem to get her to talk to me, or just to say something, or it's almost just that the calm pattern that we had over the years, and so we had that. So what comes across to me is a rhythm. It's not even, and the rhythm comes with those words, but it's the inflection. So, but to have a straight on conversation like the way Larry does, I am not near there. Uh,
yeah. I'm not. I'm
So
not
yeah,
either.
I definitely respect his abilities for sure. I mean, the last time I was talking to him, he was talking to a Hawaiian warrior from
Yeah, the
several hundred
warrior.
years ago.
Yeah, he's still doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah. And he's
so
written about what, 7 books now?
I think he's up to 12. But keep in mind, he's only published one. In fact, I got it right here, I think. Yeah. Yeah, he's published. It's going to be mirror image for you guys. I can't do anything about that.
Okay, yeah,
But
yeah.
he's published that one, and that has to do with Wallace. If you can read it, but the mirror image of that
Mhm.
deals with Wallace.
Okay.
Um, oh, it's not. Well, yeah, it says at the top. It says meeting Wallace. Uh, but he's dealing with the Wire now. He's been dealing with the Wire for quite a while, and the Wire, and all these books. He doesn't write the books. He's just basically a
Yeah.
secretary. He just
Hmm.
copies it down. They're all quoted to him. Um, the Warrior's been doing quite a few books. I think he's up to 12, 11 books counting this. Wallace did this book, and the Warrior I think is in the other books. But Larry has not published them yet for various reasons. One, the Warrior said they're not ready. The timing isn't quite right yet to release them. Also, for some reason, the Warrior doesn't know how to really what's the word, dictate the books in proper paragraph form. So Larry's got to go through and make sure the paragraph form is correct, and because they tend to just blur together. So Larry does some editing, no doubt about it, but he does not write the books. I don't even think he writes one word of the books.
Yeah.
But he has like 12 books total, but he's only published one, as I've said. So, anyways, but one of the things that Larry, there's so many things I've learned about the structure of the other realms, and they go hand in hand with many other teachings. And I'm not an expert in any of these other teachings. I've really I'm just not an expert in it. It's just I just didn't do it.
But you're so phenomenally interesting to talk to about this because you have done research and you're genuine and you're open to it. So, to me, that speaks volumes.
Thank you. And I'm trying. It's not like I go out of my way not to learn about the other teachings. Maureen, she's an expert in these other teachings, in many of the teachings. My point is, what is my point? My point is, I don't come with too many preconceived ideas on the way things should be. I'm just trying to take them the way they are. And Kevin, among other entities, Wallace and the Warrior, and there's many others, by the way, Joanne and Carlos. So there's many others. They sort of you listen to what they say, and you start to realize there is a pattern to the other side. Now, keep in mind one thing, and the skull experiment people in England learned this as well, and I'm sure all the teachings of the past thousands of years probably have said this too. These entities, they a lot of times don't know any more about what's going on than we do. And so they're sort of trying to give their best assessment. And it's not like they're all knowing, is my point. And the Warrior himself even says that. I don't know everything. My point of that is that when all these entities say these things, you got to be careful. You can't take it as absolute fact. It's their assessment of what they've experienced. But that being said, there are patterns of what goes on the other side that one can gain by listening to what they say. And one pattern is other realms, they're physical as well. But what does it mean to be physical? It means they have I don't know, how do you define physical? Well, one way to say it is we're made of atoms and molecules. But see, that's my specialty. Atoms are not what you think they are. They're not little balls. Everybody likes to think of them as that. They're what they are is confined light. Atoms are confined electric fields, and when they move, they create magnetic fields. And a moving electric field creates a magnetic field, and then the magnetic field creates the electric field, and there you go, you got light. We are beings of light, and that is what we are. And I can go into more detail on that for sure to back up my statement. But the other realms are also beings of light. It's just the light takes on a different form. There's a different form, and there's many, many different realms. And this is one of the kinds of patterns that I've picked up by listening to the entities that come through Larry. But this isn't anything new. It's not like this hadn't been talked about by other spiritual and metaphysical teachers over the centuries. But it does back up when you stop and think about just what we are. We are beings of light, and every realm has a different physics to it because the light is different, and you got to understand what light is. Light does not experience. If you could be a little light being, I mean, we are light beings. And this is where it gets weird. I don't have an answer to this, but what we call light, the physics of light, light does not experience any distance, space, nor does it experience time. If you could be a little photon of light, which is weird because you really can't be, but the physics definitely shows that going at the speed of light, you do not experience space. There's no concept of distance, and there's no concept of time. So what do you have in light? You carry information. It codes information, and it can intermingle with other light to change and manipulate that information. And this is where, I go from the concept of what other realms are, entities of light, to what is light. And that takes us into human physics. And that was Einstein's big deal, was light. And it was Einstein who discovered, with special relativity especially, that light has this weird properties that it doesn't experience distance, nor does it experience time. It just codes for information. That's what it does. And it can do that in many, many different ways. Now later, recently, they're beginning to realize that light, now, what I'm about to say next is not fact. It's what seems to be true, but it's not proven. And how do you prove this? I don't know. But the mathematics is beginning to indicate that light travels in many, many different dimensions and parallel universes. Well, that fits in perfectly with what the entities from the other realms talk about. And it's all sort of coming together, but human physicists, they're not ready. They're okay. And I can speak with some experience here because I worked at Perimeter Institute of Theoretical Physics. I was a member of a think tank up there for a while, and then I worked at Fermilab in particle physics. And so I worked with the highest level physicists. I know what they say, not just what they write, but what they say. And the bottom line is they don't know what the hell's going on. They really don't. They can develop mathematics, some of which can be indicated to be truthful, and others just it's not just pure speculation, but they're just theories. But it doesn't matter which one you pick. They all, in one form or another, have real weirdness to it. Parallel universes, multi-dimensions, the universe creating itself continuously as it expands. Every time an event occurs, you have multiple. It doesn't matter what you choose. There's nothing out there that these physicists talk about that is just cut and dry. They always involve one or more versions of parallel universes, multi-dimensions, timelines of many forms, quantized versus continual. It's a gamut of ideas, but none of them know the answer to it because we're at a point where it's really hard to get any further answers using the scientific method, because scientific method is real limiting. It works really, really good for the simple stuff, but this stuff's not simple, and it doesn't work diddly squat when you find out that. most of the
Yeah,
stuff
so
that
that would
happens,
be,
yeah,
yeah, excuse me for interrupting, but that
no,
would have to do with the fact that we have not seen really any entities that have come from the direction of Jupiter to head over to Mars, and for us to be able to pick up these sounds, because that's not the way these entities actually operate. They're not linear. They don't go from one
right.
point A to point B.
They don't.
They cross over through dimensions, through the light, or you know,
Well, that
but
that
they're also sophisticated enough to be able to take on a form
yes.
that,
So that brings us up
and
to um, I think it was both. I think the school. I'm not sure about the school experiment, but I do know Larry's work and other people, other mediums. I think it occurred in the school experiment too. That it's not
Mhm,
just like deceased entities that people have died and gone. That isn't that isn't those aren't the only entities occupying these realms. Um, they can be occupied by extraterrestrials, what we call the Greys, or
mhm,
I can't I don't want to overgeneralize, but Larry's gotten the extraterrestrials come through and with him. He's gotten ships hover over his house. Um, I think the skull experiment got aliens coming through.
mhm, 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 yeah, mhm, mhm, mhm. Oh, mhm, mhm, yeah, mhm, 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 mhm. Yeah, 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 yeah. No, no. Mhm, Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Well, what's interesting is that when you start talking about that, you start looking at the fact that they're looking at what your eyes can see, what your ears can hear, what you can touch, what you can smell, what you can, all these different senses, but it doesn't take into consideration um, like intuition or people having psychic abilities to be able to be in contact with these other entities. So it's sort of saying that if it doesn't look like a house, we're going to make it look like a house. We're not, it's not like they're trying to accept what it is. They're trying to make it into something that people can identify with, which is really pointless. And I think the entities know those people out there that are open to the idea of this different movement through um, dimensions or realms. And you're right. And there's probably as many dimensions and realms as there are uh, different galaxies. That one photo you had about the galaxy within our DNA, and it's vast, yet it's just a little microscopic little thing, yet it's vast, and it matches the not the university, the universe, that with the galaxies and all these other, how far, space goes. But the thing is that it's not the size of space. It's because of the fact that you can actually move through other spaces. So there are, space is not one. Space is also like galaxies, millions. And, you know, yeah, yes, yes. I'm gonna actually add a lot of those photos that you were talking about into this talk, so people will be able to see exactly what you talked about, photographs of the horse and the man riding the horse that the woman took those photos. Hmm. 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 Yeah. Mhm. 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 I I I totally. No, no, no. You take me along with you, and we're both not bored. That's for sure. And Marie, it's no, no, yeah, yeah, Neanderthals. Yeah, yeah. Because I found yeah, because I found that when I was experiencing my stuff over at Bent Waters with the mantid and the gray and the Colonel Thompson who had died, is that they all they did not want me to be afraid. That was the one thing that they told me. But then they knew I would be really afraid if I came upon it. And and so it was like they were preparing me, and I guess doing that flash in the mind that said, and he said, don't go this way, or, go back to your gate. I turned around and went back to my gate. I'm like, I'm not going there, you know, you know, and because, um, that's a good question. I think that they genuinely, through experience, know that people would become really fearful. The other thing is that I think that they uh, just they were doing a job and they just didn't want to be disturbed, and they were kind of saying, "Look, yeah, I'm behind you, but just don't look behind you," that kind of thing. That's what the gray did, and I'm like, "Fine, I'm not turning around. I just want to," So I just sat in my gate shack and waited for daylight to come up. I had I had lost time with the UFO. We lost about 3 hours. But that took years and years and years for me to make that discovery, because I keep remembering looking out at the North Sea after talking to the guy at the air tower, and it was pitch dark, 3 o'clock in the morning. The incident may have gone on for about 5 minutes before it disappeared into the night sky. So, and then all of a sudden and this is February in England, which is up north. So, the winter skies are dark longer periods of time. So it shouldn't have been daybreak, like all of a sudden, I mean, you could look out on the North Sea and you could start seeing like the daylight starting to kick in. So, yeah, yeah, no, it was coming into toward the runway at Woodbridge. I know I was at the end of Woodbridge. Um, I think I never really connected the two. I think the gray happened first. Yeah, the gray happened first, and it was just one of those things that I was. Oh, several months before, maybe a year before. Yeah, maybe a year. And mhm, yes, it was probably, I would say, sometime in late 1978, early 1979. Yeah. 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 Well, it happened at the scariest place on the base. It happened at East Gate. So yeah, it and it just, you know, I didn't want to be afraid. It was just kind of one of those things that I knew this was something I couldn't talk about either. I mean, I buried all this for years and years and years and decades and whatnot, because it just seemed like it would give me more issues than, I mean, you see the way people are. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I didn't ask for it. It's kind of like I I think they were studying. I think they were, I don't know, analyzing, studying me. I mean, that he was like directly behind me. The gate shack. It's that gate shack that's on the cover. His head came to, you see where the windows are on the gate shack. He would have been about maybe 3, 4 feet tall, but he had a big head. But so his face was kind of like pressed up near the window. So of course, if I looked back and see it, I would have been horrified. I probably would have. I don't know what I would have done. So, uh, mm-mm. No, no, and I was at, yeah, like I said, I was at this post, and the problem was too is that, you know, they had just opened up the career field, law enforcement to women. So women were really not well received. So so I pretty much I did not want to draw attention to myself either, you know, because I would obviously motivate the commander to I would have been kicked out of the military if I had pursued any of this. I would have been back home during the yeah, and that was during the time of recession, you know, and I was like, no, I need to stick around. I mean, you know, and I just knew that if I went to other bases, I wouldn't experience what I experienced there. And just don't know why. I mean, I do know why now with all finding out about all these experiments that they were doing over in that area with, I mean, they had some top secret facilities over there that, you know, they were playing around with Einstein's theories. And I really kind of think that they punched a hole into one of the realms. And I think it's over in Rendlesham Forest near what was Eastgate. And I think it's still there. It's just that, you know, just because we leave doesn't mean that they leave. Um, and yeah, so it's interesting. But with time, I kind of wonder if time is really like an artifact or something that we made up, you know, just to yeah. I mean, it just seems yeah, yeah. I mean, when you lose time, you know, 2, 3 hours go by, you know, or you know, they people say, well, time flies. Well, time over in England was very, very extremely slow. I mean, it just felt like a night shift lasted twice as long as, you know, it was like every time I looked at my watch, I felt like 20, 30 minutes should have gone by. So it was just, you know, but there was a gravity issue there too. Something was pushing down on me. And so, yeah, it was, you know, I grapple with it. I just, but I also think that like you and Larry, I think we're all lightning rods to the unknown, you know, and I think that, and I think we have to be careful about it too, because there's a lot of unknowns out there that we really don't want to hang out with, you know. Um, mhm. Yeah, yeah, you got good eggs and then not so good eggs, and yeah, and that's why, because I think they latch on to you too. I really do. Yeah. Yay. Mhm. Oh yeah, no doubt. Huh? Mhm. 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 Oh. Hmm. Mhm. Mhm. Ah. Mhm. 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 Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. 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 Yeah. Wow. Hmm. Hmm. Wow. Hmm. Hmm. Mhm. Oh. Mhm. 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 Wow. That's crazy. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. 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 Wow. Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. Mhm. 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 Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Wow. 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 That's amazing. I'm thinking that maybe we can do a part two interview if you wouldn't mind. Yeah, yeah, I would really like that, and I'm sure the audience would like it too. And so if we can do a dog ear that thought, and I'll remember because I will say we're going to go back and talk about what happened with you and Jay and Orville because I mean that doesn't happen. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Wow. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. I remember you saying that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's why I've been wanting you to be on the podcast for a really long time because there's so much that I've learned from you. And but we're definitely over an hour and a half, so um, I will have to wrap it up, but we will to be continued. To be con Yeah. Well, this is God, Aliens, and a Cup of Coffee. Lori Rayfelt here with my dear friend Mark Wentz, and amazing man. And we will be back. Okay. Ooh, wah. You're welcome.